Hello, and welcome to G Fun Facts Online, the show that dives deep into the amazing stories behind the world we live in. Today, we take for granted that we can pull out a tiny device from our pocket, tap a screen, and instantly see the face of a loved one on the other side of the planet. We stream movies, play games with people in different time zones, and get news the second it happens. This invisible, high-speed web of connection feels like magic. But it wasn't always this way. The story of how we got here, how we conquered distance and time itself, is one of the most incredible sagas of human ingenuity. It's a journey that begins not with fiber optics or satellites, but with a simple click, a dot and a dash. Today, we're tracing the path from Morse code to the birth of radio, the foundational steps that shrunk our world and connected humanity like never before. So, let's get started. Imagine, for a moment, that it's the early 1800s. The fastest way to send a message from New York to London is to put it on a ship. It will take weeks, maybe even a month or more, depending on the weather. News of a war, a major political event, or even the birth of a child traveled no faster than the quickest horse or the newest steam train. The world was vast, and the continents were separated by a silent, seemingly unbridgeable gulf of time. This was the reality, until a new force was harnessed, a power that could travel through a wire almost instantaneously: electricity. The idea of sending signals through wires wasn't entirely new, but making it practical, making it a language, was the real challenge. And the man who cracked the code was, funnily enough, a painter. Samuel F.B. Morse was a successful portrait artist, but a personal tragedy set him on a new path. While he was away from home painting a portrait, his wife fell gravely ill and passed away. By the time the news reached him by horse messenger, she had already been buried. This devastating delay fueled his obsession with finding a faster way to communicate. In the 1830s, Morse, along with his brilliant assistant Alfred Vail, developed a system that was pure genius in its simplicity. They created a code of dots and dashes that could represent every letter, number, and punctuation mark. A short electrical pulse was a dot, a longer one was a dash. An operator on one end would tap out a message, and an electromagnet on the other end would replicate those taps, printing the marks onto a strip of paper. This was Morse code. After years of struggling for funding, Morse finally convinced the U.S. Congress to finance a test line. On May 24, 1844, the stage was set. In the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., Morse tapped out a message to Vail, who was waiting in Baltimore, Maryland, about 40 miles away. The message was from the Bible. "What hath God wrought?" In an instant, the electrical pulses traveled the wire, and Vail received it perfectly. History was made. The age of instantaneous communication had begun. The impact was immediate and seismic. Newspapers could now report on events from distant cities on the same day they happened. Businesses could coordinate operations and prices across the country. By 1861, a telegraph line stretched across the entire North American continent, and the world was already feeling smaller. But one massive barrier remained: the Atlantic Ocean. While telegraph wires stitched together countries, the oceans remained vast, silent voids. The dream of connecting the old world and the new world with a physical cable was seen by many as pure fantasy. The man who dared to make this fantasy a reality was an American entrepreneur named Cyrus West Field. He founded the Atlantic Telegraph Company in 1854 and embarked on one of the most audacious engineering projects in history. Think about the challenge. They needed to manufacture and lay a single, continuous cable, thousands of miles long, across the treacherous, deep, and largely uncharted floor of the Atlantic Ocean. The cable itself was a complex construction of copper wires, insulated with gutta percha, a natural rubber, and protected by a heavy iron sheath. The first attempt in 1857 was a disaster. The cable, weighing over a ton per mile, snapped under its own weight and was lost to the sea. But Field was relentless. In August 1858, after more failed attempts and heart-stopping moments, they finally succeeded. A cable connected Ireland to Newfoundland. The world erupted in celebration. On August 16th, the first official message clicked its way across the ocean floor. It was a formal, 98-word congratulatory note from Queen Victoria to U.S. President James Buchanan. It took almost 17 hours to transmit, as the signal was incredibly weak, but it worked. For a few glorious weeks, the continents were connected, but the triumph was tragically short-lived. The engineer in charge, trying to boost the weak signal, applied too much voltage, frying the cable's delicate insulation. The line went silent. The dream had died. Critics called Field a fool and a fraud. But he refused to give up. He spent years raising new funds and working on a stronger, more reliable cable design. Finally, in 1866, using the largest ship in the world at the time, the SS Great Eastern, a new, better cable was successfully laid. This time, it held. The connection was permanent. Before the cable, sending a message to Europe and getting a reply could take 2 months. Now, it took minutes. International trade, diplomacy, and news were revolutionized. The world had shrunk, and it would never be the same again. Yet, as revolutionary as the telegraph was, it had a limitation. It spoke in code. It required trained operators to translate the world into dots and dashes. The next great leap would be to send not just code, but the most natural form of human communication, the voice. This brings us to Alexander Graham Bell. Like Morse, Bell's work was driven by a deep personal connection to communication. Both his mother and his wife were deaf, and he was a dedicated teacher of the hearing impaired. His research into hearing and speech led him to experiment with transmitting sound waves over wires. The story of the telephone's invention is filled with intrigue, including a famous race to the patent office. On February 14, 1876, Bell filed his patent for the telephone just hours before a competitor, Elisha Gray, filed a notice for a similar invention. Bell's patent was granted, and on March 10, 1876, the first ever telephone call took place. Bell, having spilled some acid on his clothes in his workshop, spoke into his device to his assistant in the next room, saying the now immortal words, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." Watson came running, not because of the accident, but because he had clearly heard Bell's voice coming through the machine. At first, the telephone was a luxury item, a tool for wealthy businessmen to connect their offices. But as networks grew and switchboards were invented to connect different lines, the telephone began to weave itself into the fabric of society. It transformed business, allowing for instant negotiation and coordination. But its social impact was even more profound. For the first time, you could hear the voice of a loved one from miles away, sharing news, laughter, and comfort in real time. It fostered a new sense of closeness and immediacy in personal relationships, fundamentally changing our expectations about how connected we could be. We had conquered the wire. But what if we could get rid of the wire altogether? What if we could send messages through the very air around us? This was the dawn of wireless, the age of radio. The scientific groundwork was laid by brilliant minds like James Clerk Maxwell, who theorized the existence of electromagnetic waves, and Heinrich Hertz, who proved they were real. But it was a young Italian inventor, Guglielmo Marconi, who saw the immense practical potential. Marconi wasn't a theorist, he was a tinkerer and a visionary. Starting in 1895, he began experimenting, turning these invisible waves into a communication system. He started small, sending a signal from one side of his attic to the other. Soon he was transmitting across his garden. He then moved to England, secured patents, and demonstrated his invention for the British government, sending Morse code signals over ever-increasing distances, first across land, then across the open sea. But Marconi's ultimate ambition was the same as Cyrus Westfield's: to conquer the Atlantic. Many scientists at the time believed it was impossible. They thought radio waves, like light, traveled in straight lines and would simply fly off into space rather than following the Earth's curve. Marconi believed otherwise. In December 1901, he set up a massive transmitting station in Cornwall, England, and a receiving station with a simple kite antenna in St. John's, Newfoundland, over 2,000 miles away. On December 12th, with his ear pressed to a receiver, Marconi listened for the prearranged signal, and then he heard it, faint but unmistakable. 3 simple clicks. The Morse code for the letter S. ... Those 3 clicks changed the world. They proved that global wireless communication was possible. Radio waves were not flying off into space. They were bouncing off the ionosphere and following the curvature of the planet. Marconi's work laid the foundation for everything that would follow. The initial use of radio was for wireless telegraphy, sending Morse code for ships at sea. Its life-saving importance was tragically proven in 1912, when the Titanic sank. The ship's wireless operator was able to transmit distress signals that guided rescue efforts, saving hundreds of lives that would have otherwise been lost. Soon, inventors figured out how to transmit not just code, but voice and music. The era of broadcasting began, and radio became a powerful new medium for news, entertainment, and culture, uniting nations and shaping public opinion in ways never before possible. From the staccato clicks of Morse's telegraph to the faint dots heard by Marconi across the Atlantic, this first chapter in the story of modern communication is a powerful testament to our unending quest to connect. Each invention built upon the last, shrinking the globe step by step and paving the way for the even more incredible technologies that were to come. On our next episode, we'll continue this journey, exploring the arrival of moving pictures with television, the leap into orbit with satellite communication, and the creation of the global network that puts all of human knowledge at our fingertips, the Internet. Thanks for listening to G Fun Facts Online. We'll see you next time.